Welcome back. My name's Nekrage, and here's another build. We're looking at another build today for hardcore Frozen Sorc. All right, so it is built around hardcore, but you could of course adjust it for softcore if you want. I always think it's easier to go from hardcore to softcore. You take a hardcore build and adjust it for softcore, then the other way around. So if you ever see there's too much survivability in here for me, and I'm playing softcore, I want some more damage. Very easy to do that. You'll see very easy options for that, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But to start, we are going to start with the skill screen. And the reason why I'm starting here is because I wanted to show you the enchantments. If you're playing hardcore, and if you guys have watched any of my other videos, you know I always say, you have options here. You can do this, you can do that. You have no option here. If you're playing hardcore, you take Flame Shield as an enchantment. There is no exception for that. There is no wiggle room. Luckily enough, you have a second enchantment slot. Personally, I think that's bad design. That there's like a must-have, you know? That's always a bad design in an RPG when you're trying to make your own builds and stuff. But that is what we have here. This is quite literally the strongest thing in the game across all 5 characters in hardcore. That is insane. Saves your life once every 2 minutes, and it does more than what you see. It also heals you for 50% of your missing life. It essentially guarantees you're going to be 50% or higher when you get killed. When you get killed, it'll save your life and heal you. And then you could always port back to town and wait for that to come off cooldown and then go back out again. Because you know people are going to be doing that. Now, second enchantment slot. Let's talk about that a little bit. I didn't choose this one because there's no real sure thing like the fire, like the flame shield. Frostbolt, direct damage from skills, applies up to 15% chill. That is better than it sounds. Chill obviously slows enemies. When we have enemies chilled, there's things in the Paragon tree and such that will help us do more damage to enemies that are chilled, take less damage, stuff like that. And then eventually, if you get enough chill, it'll freeze the enemy. And then there's stuff that's like when an enemy's frozen, you do this. And the things that work on frozen enemies are always better than the things that work on chill enemies. And when an enemy's frozen, they're not doing anything, right? Chill means they're slower. Frozen means they're doing nothing. So getting to a frozen state faster on enemies is good. In addition to that, this does work on bosses, believe it or not. Whatever anyone tells you, it's wrong. It's not quite a freeze like you would expect on a normal enemy or an elite. But that gray bar at the top of boss fights, go look at a boss video. You'll see a little gray bar at the top. Go look at it in a Shava video. I have one on the channel. And as you apply crowd control effects to a boss that is unstoppable, which is like immune to crowd control, that is essentially temporarily immune, where every crowd control effect you apply to the boss, instead of applying the crowd control, it pushes that bar, and you'll get them into a knockdown state. And as you can imagine, when you have 12 people wailing on a boss that's knocked down, and they're all doing additional damage because they have stuff like when an enemy's stunned or knocked down or crowd controlled in any way, you do more damage, stuff like that, people start really punching the damage in. So with something like this, you could really help push that bar and get a knockdown state on a world boss. Now, Frozen Orb is another option. Whenever you cast a non-basic skill, you have a 20% chance to launch a Frozen Orb at a nearby enemy. Frozen Orb itself is also considered a non-basic skill. When you use it, you can throw 2 of them out. You proc it. That is quite good. And you do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 non-basic skills that you will be using that can proc this. It's a lot of additional damage, can help freeze enemies more. And then the other options are not Frost Nova. You do have Frost Nova in the tree, but you don't have conjuration skills in this build. So that's going to do nothing for you. Ice Armor. When you take a hit, you have a 5% chance to apply Ice Armor. For those of you guys that know my videos, I'm always about the survivability for hardcore, to be as tanky as possible. I don't agree with this choice. I actually don't. It's a 5% chance to give you an Ice Armor. For those of you that don't know what Ice Armor does, it gives you a barrier, which means that's going to like protect your health. It's like a shield that has to go down first before they can start doing damage to your life, right? So it gives you a barrier for 6 seconds, absorbing 30% of your base life and damage. While Ice Armor is active, 5% of your damage dealt is added to its barrier. That's amazing. Amazing ability. It's great. But a 5% chance is quite low. Now, I usually aim for the tanky side of things when you're choosing between damage and tankiness. I usually go for survivability, right? In this case, I'm going to actually disagree with that, and my winner between the 3 personally is Frozen Orb. And second place is actually Frostbolt. Last is Ice Armor. And the reason for that is both of these will increase your damage immensely, Frozen Orb being the one that increases the damage much more, but this is actually a little bit of a damage increase too, because you will get to a frozen state faster. It's a minor damage increase, more of a CC increase. And Ice Armor is just pure defense. In my opinion, the extra damage and the extra chill and frozen that you're going to proc on Frozen Orb will actually lead to a higher survivability than the survivability enchantment will. I would highly recommend Frozen Orb in this. Your choice, though. There was a little bit of an option to adjust, a little bit of adjustment here and there on what you want to do. Completely up to you. Now let's get started on the skill tree, because I don't want this to be too long of a video. I got to get started here. All right, Frostbolt, we 5 out of 5 this one, because it is a pretty decent damage ability when we have it 5 out of 5, and we'll be doing a decent amount of damage to enemies when they're chilled and frozen. This will actually still help. 49% damage, and chilling them for 15%. Frostbolt has 15% chance to explode on chilled enemies, hitting surrounding enemies. A chance to increase to 100% against frozen enemies. Like I was saying, when enemies are frozen, we're going to have a lot of that type of stuff. Frostbolt generates mana when hitting chilled or frozen enemies. The other option is Frostbolt makes frozen enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. We could do the vulnerable. That is a choice. I'm going to go with the mana, actually, because we want to throw out as many frozen orbs as possible. There is a choice that you can go for ice shards. If you do, you obviously are going to change the enchantment, because you're not going to have frozen orb. You're going to have ice shards instead. There's another option later in the tree called Blizzard. That's also an option. However, if you take Blizzard, you don't take one of these two, because it's not a skill with cooldown. It is a skill with mana cost, so you really don't want all of them for hardcore. If you want to go more and more damage and stuff like that, go for it, but they do also pull from the same mana pool, so you're not really increasing your damage much, because you cast a Blizzard, that's one less Frozen Orb. It's kind of how it's going to work. So Frozen Orb is what I choose to go with over the Ice Shards, but you could definitely do Ice Shards if you want. Unleash an orb that chills and expels piercing shards, dealing 44% damage. Upon expiration, Frozen Orb explodes, dealing 41% damage and chilling enemies. When cast above 50% mana, Frozen Orb explosion damage is increased by 30%. Frozen Orb's explosion has a 25% chance to make all enemies hit vulnerable for 2 seconds. Frozen Orb always makes frozen enemies vulnerable. More frozen stuff. The other option is Frozen Orb's explosion restores 5 mana when hitting a frozen enemy. That's certainly an option as well, but I really do think you should be taking either this for vulnerability or this for vulnerability. I prefer this one. So I personally would recommend this. It's a pretty strong recommendation on that. We got only 1 point in here for the maximum mana increased, and we grabbed 3 in here. Your core skills deal 9% increased damage when cast above 50 mana, and that of course combos with the Frozen Orb. When cast above 50 mana, you're going to do more damage with the explosion. So these two work in tandem. You pretty much want to try to always throw a Frozen Orb when you're at 50% or higher. Moving on, Flame Shield. Went over this. Must have. There is no exception. You have to take it. It is too good. It's too good not to take. It grants your movement speed increase, and it heals you for 50% of your missing life. Tip with Flame Shield. You can use it without having it be on your bar. So you could take seven skills, don't put it on your bar, and take it as the enchantment only. It will still work to save your life, but it is also an awesome ability to use on its own. It you pop it, you get immunity for 2 seconds, you heal for 50% of your missing life, you get a movement speed increase. It's still great on its own. And we do want to be using abilities with cooldowns in this build. I'll show you why. And in addition to that, it's just two forms of survivability in that way. And Flame Shield will work twice for you. You can use it to save your life if you get a scary moment, and then maybe you die and the enchantment saves your life again. Like, you can use it 2 times. And one last thing. If you use Flame Shield and it's on cooldown, the enchantment will still save your life if you die while it's on cooldown. The enchantment then goes on cooldown for 2 minutes. If you die during that 2 minutes, you're dead. That's not going to save you. But if this is on cooldown when you use it, the enchantment will still save you. Very cool. Ice Armor. We went over this. We got a barrier for 30% of our life for 6 seconds, and you get 5% of your damage dealt added to the barrier. That is incredible. It's one of the strongest barriers in the game. It is very, very, very good, and I see a lot of people not taking this for some reason. I take the form in Barbarian. Barbarian gets a similar one, and this one's a lot better than the Barbarians. Take the damn thing, please. And if you're playing hardcore, it's very good. The only thing the Barbarians one does that this one doesn't do is it gives you Unstoppable. Unstoppable is very good, but this is a stronger barrier. A stronger barrier protection, for your health. And then It's for your health. While Ice Armor is active, your mana regeneration is increased by 25%. Damage against vulnerable enemies contribute 50% more to Ice Armor's barrier. And like we said before, Frozen Orb, we're going to be getting vulnerable, so it's going to add to our Ice barrier more. I'm more of a melee type of dude, by the way, and this build actually gets me excited. Like, I'm actually considering Sorc as one of my second or third options for my next class, but I'm definitely going Barb first. But anyway, I like this build a lot. I really do. Frost Nova. Unleash a Torrent of Frost, freezing enemies around you for 3 seconds. That is great for survivability as well as damage because enemies are frozen. We'll get all these additional effects against frozen enemies. That's great. Killing enemies frozen by Frost Nova reduces its cooldown by 1 second up to 4 seconds per cast. Frost Nova generates mana per enemy hit. The other option is Frost Nova makes enemies vulnerable, but the Frozen Orb, along with the enchantment of Frozen Orb, is going to be a lot of vulnerabilities going out, so you don't really need that. I would prefer to go with the mana to help me throw out more Frozen Orbs. Moving on, you gain 3% damage reduction against elites for each second you haven't taken damage from 1 up to 40%. Let me reread that because that sounded confusing. You gain 3% damage reduction against elites for each second you haven't taken damage from one, up to 40%. So if you haven't taken a damage from an elite recently, every second you're going to get 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%. It's going to go all the way up to 40% until you do get hit by an elite, and it's going to reduce that hit down by 40%, and it's going to reset that, and it's going to start ticking again, 3, 6, 9. And so the next time you take a hit, it reduces the damage from the elite. There are some very tough hitting elites and ranged elites too, so don't think, I won't let them hit me. You're going to take hits. You are going to take hits. Elites will snipe you with archer shots that my tanky barbarian got hit for like I don't know, maybe like 40% health through his fortifying stuff, and he was quite tanky. So there's going to be situations where you do get hit, and that was World Tier 2. So be careful. Be careful out there. There are definitely dudes that hit quite hard, and if you know Diablo, you know some elites can roll some crazy affixes and suffixes or whatever they do, and it just happens to roll a really, really strong elite. Like, what was it? Like, Critical Strike, like Spectral Blow or something like that from Diablo 2. You roll some stuff like that, and like they can one-shot you. Be careful out there. So using a cooldown grants you 30% of your maximum life as a barrier for 2 seconds. This is one of the reasons why I said we want to use cooldowns in this build. We want barriers up. They're important. I'm going to show you exactly why. Not only do they save your life, not only do they protect you, but barriers have a 15% increased duration, so I know 2 seconds sounds low, but you're constantly going to have this barrier coming onto you as you're using your cooldowns. Your barriers have 15% increased duration. That's a little bit there, not too bad. While you have a barrier active, you apply 24% more chill, which means enemies will be slowed more and frozen more often. And then frost skills have up to a 9% chance to instantly freeze. There'll be a lot of CC in this. Your enemies are going to hate you. Trust me. They're not going to be moving too well. They're not going to be closing the gap too fast. They'll be very slow. They'll be frozen quite often. And this is also a barrier as well, by the way, just to talk about Ice Armor again. 6 seconds, so that's going to increase the duration of the barrier. And then, of course, while we have that active as well, we're going to do more chill, which also means faster freezes. Here's Blizzard. Certainly an option, but you don't take Frozen Orb if you take Blizzard. Completely up to you. But you will notice one thing about Blizzard. It doesn't have Vulnerable on it anywhere. If you do take Blizzard, you should go back and adjust some of the other options on what you want to do, like maybe use Frost Nova, make sure it applies Vulnerable, stuff like that. Just make sure you have a way to apply Vulnerable. It's a great damage source. It is super, super good. Moving on to this section, I love it. 15% more damage against elites. That works on bosses, world bosses, act-ending bosses, dungeon bosses. It works on them. Very, very good. You deal 9% increased damage to chilled enemies and an 18% increased damage to frozen enemies. More reason to keep our enemies frozen. You deal 12% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. Lucky hit. Cold damage against vulnerable enemies has up to a 20% chance to generate 15 mana, which means more frozen orbs. And then, of course, Deep Freeze. Encases yourself in ice, becoming immune for 4 seconds, continually dealing 25% damage and chilling enemies for 14%. When Deep Freeze expires, it explodes and deals 100% additional damage. Casting Deep Freeze again ends the effect early, which is amazing. Don't sleep on that. If you use Deep Freeze for whatever reason, maybe you have a bunch of poison on you from a Shava, you use Deep Freeze, so you're immune, and then a Shava starts lifting his claw. You might want to break out of Deep Freeze and get the hell out of dodge, because if you wait for Deep Freeze to go off, maybe you are in there for another 2 seconds, he lifts his claw, Deep Freeze ends, and then boom, he slams down. You might want to make the wise decision to end Deep Freeze early and get out of there. When Deep Freeze ends, gain 10% of your base life as a barrier. Another barrier there, right? For 6 seconds for each enemy you froze while it was active. You get an amazing barrier. If you're in AoE, you AoE with that. You hit a ton of enemies. You get a massive barrier for 6 seconds. And of course, the duration of the barrier will be increased by that. And then when Deep Freeze ends, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced by 50%, which is great because you might be able to end Deep Freeze. I don't know, maybe Frost Nova, anything that's not frozen or gets out of frozen, maybe that comes up quick, and you're in a dangerous situation still, your ice armor, you know, all that stuff comes back faster, and that can definitely protect you. And then one thing I really, really like in this tree, the end, your Frost skills have up to a 10% chance to make your next cast of Ice Shard, Frozen Orb, or Blizzard consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage. Chances doubled against vulnerable enemies. This is incredible. We want to throw as many Frozen Orbs out as possible. It is very, very good. Now, the Paragon tree. We go with 4 glyphs on this one. And by the way, I saw some people link some builds with like 7 glyphs. That's not a good build. Don't just go for maximum glyphs. Trust me, I know glyphs are amazing. That is not how we do builds. That is not wise. Trust me. And if you need help with your build, come to my stream, link it in the YouTube, let me know. I'm always happy to kind of critique builds and help you make a better build. All right. As always, we always take the left and right side at the start of every class because every single class has life on both sides. Very, very important. You'll notice I have life search in here just to show off where the life nodes are. So we did pick up the non-physical damage, which is everything we do as a Sorc, the life nodes, and we picked up the resistance to all and life. We jump up, and the first glyph we grab is the damage reduction against close enemies. Like it or not, enemies are going to get close. And even if you're ranged, they will get close. They will close the gap. And while you're using Deep Freeze, they kind of close in on you as you're sitting there. You can't move. They'll kind of, encroach on you. They'll get frozen. You're, of course, immune in there. But then we break out. If for whatever reason they're not frozen or you're vulnerable, you could still take a hit from them. And they break out of their freeze quite quickly. They could still hit you. They will be close. There will be times when they get close. I highly recommend taking the close damage reduction for every class. Honestly, every build should be taking this because we also don't know what's out there. I talk about this a lot where you don't know what enemies are out there. There could be, I don't know, skeleton warthogs that charge out across the screen in a split second and close the gap, and they charge you for a massive amount of damage and do a lot of damage to you real fast. We don't know. We just don't know. That's the truth. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what's waiting for us, and I'm sure you will be taking melee damage as ranged players while you're playing. This is a big node to take. We grab both sides here for non-physical damage. We grab the resistance to all elements. That's amazing. We grab all that resist. We definitely want resist. And then we jump up into the Frigid Fate tree, the Paragon board Frigid Fate. First thing we do is run up here and we get damage to vulnerable enemies, which is good because we're going to have them vulnerable. Then we grab the glyph, that 10% damage reduction while you have an active barrier. We have barriers throughout the tree like crazy, a lot of ways to apply them, and keep in mind every time we use a cooldown, we are going to get a barrier. So 10% damage reduction while you have an active barrier is amazing. Cold Resist, Intelligence, jumping up, we're going to grab this legendary node, which is one of the best legendary nodes you will see. Dealing damage to vulnerable enemies increases your lucky hit chance by 1% for 5 seconds, up to 15%. That is, I'm going to show you, we'll search lucky hit on the build, and we will, we'll take a look at some of the stuff. Lucky hit, 9% chance to instantly freeze. Cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 15 mana. And then, of course, one of my favorites, 10% chance to make your next cast of Ice Shards, Frozen Orb, or Blizzard costs no mana and deal 40% increased damage. Chance to double against vulnerable enemies. We've gone over this, but as you can see, there are lucky hit options in the tree. This one, not really so much because that requires the enchantment for that lucky hit to take effect, so ignore that. But that is big. Lucky hit increasing nodes are huge. Legendary node does have it here, so when we do damage to vulnerable enemies, increase lucky hit, which helps us increase or get our additional procs, right? We like those. We want those. More lucky hit here, more cold resist. Life, always good to have life in hardcore. And then we're going to jet on over to the left side, and we're going to grab enemies deal 13.3% reduced damage to you for 5 seconds after they are no longer frozen. So you didn't quite kill the target, so when they get out of freeze, they're still an enemy. They can still attack you, can still damage you, can still kill you. So 13.3% reduced damage to you for 5 seconds is quite good. And then for every 5 willpower purchase within range, you deal 3% increased damage to chilled targets. That thing is great. You don't have to go left first. You can definitely go up. It's completely up to you. I would say the real tempting thing to go up first is this. Killing a frozen enemy grants you 15% of your maximum life as a barrier. More barriers. Good stuff, right? So that's a tempting node. So you could jet up here, grab the cold damage here, and chill application increasing buff here, which will help us freeze our enemies, damage reduction from chilled enemies, and then grab this, then dart to the left. That is an option because we do have life nodes here. We do want to grab these somewhat early. Lightning resist and life nodes, that's amazing. More life nodes here, some potion healing, and then we grab lightning resist. Grab those nodes. We grab, of course, the glyph. We don't grab the stunned enemies things. We don't want these. They're not worth taking. And at the end of the build, you'll have like extra points. So I put them in here for willpower. There's a little bit extra willpower, more than we really need to activate the glyph because if you look, every 5 willpower purchased within the range, you deal 3% increased damage to chill targets. Everyone's going to be chilled like at all times while we're fighting. So it's a good thing to buff up with some extra willpower. So we're going to jump up here. We went over this a little bit. We're grabbing that frozen enemy, grant you barrier. Damage to chilled enemies, that goes up. Non-physical damage, it's a big damage area right there. We're going to jump up into here. Damage to chilled enemies again. Damage reduction from chilled enemies. So pretty much everyone we fight is going to be chilled and they'll be doing less damage to us. After spending 50 mana, you deal 6.7% increased damage and gain 6.7% increased mana regeneration for 3 seconds and a 50% bonus to all magic nodes within range. So we'll be getting the buff to all of these damage reduction from chilled and damage to chilled enemies. Then we jet over to the right side and we finalize our build with life, maximum mana, life nodes. We're going to take a look at the stats. 44% life, 38.75% resist all, a massive 102% cold resist. You'll never need to worry about cold resist. 60% lightning resist. Damage reduction from chilled enemies is 30%. You have a crazy amount of barrier forming stuff in here, so you're always going to have shields and barriers running on your life. So you're never going to be like vulnerable with your life pool. It's almost constant barriers running on you at all times. It is good. It is good. It actually, I love this build so much. I really do. That it pushed Sorc from like one of the last 2 classes for me. It like bumped it up quite a bit. It was like Barb, Druid, because I like my melee classes. So it was like Barb, Druid. Then it was like Rogue, and then Necro and Sorc dead last for me, like tied. Now Sorc kind of jumped up a little bit just because this build exists. So I hope you guys like this. I hope you guys see the strength in this build in both hardcore and damage wise and like controlling your enemies. I hope you guys see it. I hope you have some questions, because if you do, I love to answer them. I always love to talk builds. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Do you do a frozen build differently? Let me know what you do. Let me know what you take if you do anything differently. Always happy to hear that. And thank you so much for watching. Check out the other videos on the channel. There's a ton of videos about builds and all that good stuff. And throw me a sub. Catch you guys in the next video. And see you in the what I call it, the depths of hell, I guess, right? See you in hell!